Now it's time to introduce our keynote speaker, Kathleen McElroy. In the journalism world, Kathleen certainly needs no introduction, but we'll still do one here. Kathleen is the Frank Bennick Chair in Journalism and co-director of the Center for Ethical Leadership in Media at the University of Texas at Austin. Before receiving her PhD from UT, she held various positions at the New York Times, including Associate Managing Editor, Dining Editor, Deputy Sports Editor, and Deputy Website Editor. But it wasn't just at the New York Times where Kathleen has had her vaunted career. Previously, she worked at The National and All Sports Daily and Newsday on Long Island, as well as, all right, Texas folks, the Austin American-Statesman, the Huntsville Item, and the Eagle and Bryan College Station. Her research interests include newsroom practices, obituaries, and racial discourse. We are grateful to hear her discuss how the term information has been redefined and FOIA's impact on business and government, education, and sports. Following Kathleen's speech, we should have some time for a couple of audience questions specifically related to information and access. And with that, please join me in welcoming Kathleen McElroy. Kathleen.
I tore my Achilles a couple of years ago on a tennis court. Corey knows this. And so I'm very careful. I also want to give a shout out to Terry Bertling here. She was my editor at the Huntsville Item, and now a professor at Texas State. So can I admit that I couldn't find the email in which I told Kelly what my topic was going to be? So what you're about to hear, if it were a sentence, you wouldn't be able to diagram it properly. But the beautiful thing is nobody diagrams sentences anymore anyway. So, I think I originally wanted to talk about information because, let's face it, that's the thing that the public doesn't quite understand. The difference between journalism, facts, and information. Right? And like we're trained, we even know that facts can be meaningless. One of the first exercises I give to my students in a reporting class is there's a car accident, and among the facts, which would you put into the first paragraph of the story? And one of the facts is one car is red and the other one is blue. That might be factually true, but it's not important, right? So, but to the public, even they get information, but it may not be true, right? We train our students the difference between disinformation, someone is actively trying to tell you something not true, and misinformation, your Uncle Ray Ray thinks man never landed on the moon, okay? Disinformation becomes misinformation when it's repeated by Uncle Ray Ray, your roommate, your parents, whatever. Someone had told me recently that, Donald Trump had endorsed, Taylor Swift had endorsed Donald Trump. Well, that wasn't true. That was something the Trump campaign had manufactured, and of course, since the debate, that's come out. But how do you help that? Well, guess what? This speech is not gonna settle misinformation and disinformation. But I just wanted to set it up for us to sort of understand the things we're fighting. I think the thing that we can address and is pertinent to this organization is the concept of sunshine. It's the concept that there's information out there that everybody needs to know. Truthful information, government information. There are policies and there's data out there, and everyone should understand how to get it. I heard a lot of the experts earlier today. I'm not a First Amendment scholar, okay? I'm not even a journalist anymore. I will admit I spend more time watching HGTV and the Food Network than any cable news channel. But in terms of journalism education and things like that, I do want to help my students understand civics and government. And guess what? We can do that. We've got 4 years of journalism majors. They eventually will figure out that the Railroad Commission has nothing to do with railroads. at least these days. That's easily fixed. But the public still doesn't get that. And what I kind of wonder is, how can we educate the public in a completely nonpartisan but informational way? It's work that I know Kelly and other organizations are doing, but let me do a blast from the past. Those of you of a certain age will remember this. Oh, I'm just a bill, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. So there was this thing called Schoolhouse Rock. And of a certain age, we all knew about bills, we knew about conjunction, junction, what's your function, linking up words and, okay. But the point was, here was this thing, pre-social media, pre-whatever, totally nonpartisan, and it just explained stuff. Can we explain stuff now to the public? When I hear you all talking about, I have to admit, earlier today, I was kind of Googling some of the things y'all were talking about. Toma? I mean, tomar means to take, or to eat, to drink. No, oh, it's the Texas Open Meetings Act. And I thought, even if I were to look at a videotape of this, how much of this would I understand without having things sort of explained? And again, because I'm a child of a certain age, or a woman, like VH1, remember when they do the pop-up videos that have a video, then it explains something? So it's almost like when people are talking about TOMA, well, they're really talking about the Texas Open Meetings Act, and it means this and this and this. I worry that, I know this is an in-house event, this is not meant for the public, but I do think that sometimes we are talking at our public and not with our public. And we're only trying to find them when they come to us, right? How can we share this information regardless of whether that person subscribes or is on your X feed? Notice I've trained myself to say that. How can we get to them at the July 4th fair or the Juneteenth fair, you know? Instead of pushing subscriptions or whatever, could we have, hey, try to take our civics exam, and if you pass, you get this collapsible water bottle, which I got at the Texas Tribune Fest, right? Because I passed the Chevron quiz. I knew where they were going. But I'm wondering, can we do more of that what is out there is available for everybody? There's a chilling effect on journalists, on journalism students, and on the public. Not being chilled are the extremists, who've learned, by the way, how to take things like FOIA and use it as a tool of harassment and abuse, right? But I contend that, from the 70s, there was something called the silent majority. Nixon was saying the great majority of people they're quiet, we don't know who they are, and they're not the extremists. In that case, he meant like the crazy liberal people. But what if there is like a silent majority of 60, and I'm not talking about people whether they're voting for one candidate or another, but people who kind of don't know what's going on here in the state of Texas, regardless of their political affiliation. So how many people understand, besides those citizens who use it a lot, that they can do open records requests? You want to know who decided what your kid's eating in their lunchroom? You can find that out. Can we create a magnet, I like that idea, by the way, that says, sunshine is for everybody, or we all need sunshine, and here's the website for this organization. I guess what I'm talking about is, we think a lot of this information is super hard, or we think that it's complex and the public can't understand it. Well, they don't have to understand it perfectly. We certainly don't understand it perfectly, we lay people. So I think there is a way that we can get this information to people. I also like the way you talked about how even if people don't go into law school, that they're kind of ambassadors. Well, most of the people who go to major in journalism will never be in a newsroom. And as the co-director for the Center for Ethical Leadership in Media, maybe that's not a bad thing, right? But what I'm saying is that, newsrooms have their own issues, but we're creating news ambassadors. We're creating people who will understand journalism, who respect it, and who will share that with their family. So I think that we need to do that same thing, as we just need to create people who know that we are not the enemy, which I think most people kind of get that, but also know we're not Superman. And I say that in all sincerity. I think for so long, journalism has sort of seen itself above the fray of so many things and really didn't want to explain stuff, or that how we operate was kind of proprietary information. The First Amendment is our cape, or maybe the S. That's not going to fly anymore. And for someone like me, this country has only been a democracy since like the mid-60s. So even attaching ourselves to democracy, well, I'm not even going to go there. But my point is, we can talk about sunshine. We don't have to go all the way to democracy. We can be Superman and be transparent, not Superman, Clark Kent, and be transparent in talking about civics, talking about government, and talking about journalism. You can let people know, hey, we tried to file an open records on this. It's taken a long time. That's why we haven't been able to do this. Or I spoke to a group of high schoolers about a situation that was going on in their hometown, in their hometown paper. And these were not journalism majors. They were also very, very pro A&M and had no idea that I had an attachment to Texas A&M, which is, okay, they're young. But I told them what this local paper was having to deal with in this situation, and they were shocked. They were upset. And the editor happened to be in there taking photos of me because, I was at this high school. And he thanked me because he says, I can't tell that story. So maybe we need to do a better job of telling each other's stories. Okay? We need to do a better job of saying what we know and don't know. I think we need to demystify the government, and we need to demystify journalism. Because, as we know, there are citizens out there who are doing some of this work, and maybe we can get more citizens to help us in this process. So, I know I rambled, and I hope this wasn't a little demoralizing in any way, but I just want to say that there've got to be opportunities for us to get the sunshine to the public. Like trying to end disinformation, not in my lifetime. Good luck, young people, all right? But there are smaller things that we can tackle. And I think open records, open meetings, and just demystifying civics in a state in which students take a lot of high school and a lot of college government classes and still don't know the Railroad Commission, and still don't know a lot of stuff. Well, you know what? Maybe as an enterprise, we Texas journalists and organizations need to step in and create something in which the general public can have an idea of what all this stuff is and how they can know it's for them. It's for us being citizens, not just us being journalists. And that's what I got. I will add this one thing. When we think about the First Amendment and journalism, it's 4 words. 4 words in the middle of an amendment that really wasn't supposed to be the First Amendment. And I say that again to let's get off our high horse. It's the First Amendment because they threw out some stuff about congressional pay, right? Which they ended up doing in like the 22nd Amendment or something. Again, not a scholar. Get off our high horse. Be Clark Kent. Just say, this is about doing what's right for our citizens. This is what's right for our communities. That's it. Thanks. And I will take questions. Was I way too fast? I have other stuff, but as a teacher, I'm kind of always aware, like, do the students look like they need coffee? Are they already preparing for their next class? Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question. Just at the very last thing that you said, it sounds like you think, and I think this is a good thing, of journalists as educators.
Absolutely, that's a great way to put it. And if you think about journalists, newspapers, and I am talking old-fashioned newspapers, back in the day, helped educate immigrant populations. It was done in a kind of side way, like you read this enough and you'll figure out these terms or whatever. But I do think we can be more obvious in explaining stuff. The Washington Post has done some really cool videos explaining parts of government, and that's part of the Post mission because it's in the Capitol. But I would love to get some students who are here do a social media video on the Railroad Commission that we could all share, or something that we could post and people can pick it up, or as I said, I'm going to go back to what you said, Allison. Journalists can also educate.
Talk about the story that came out of you, what it was like to be the subject of the story, as opposed to the journalist writing it. That's really interesting.
Oh yeah, well, what's interesting is for part of that settlement, I did sign an NDA, which I was happy to do because I didn't want to talk about it forever and ever. But I will give you this. How many of you know the movie Independence Day? Okay, I won't give it away, but so I studied obituaries while I was I actually wrote my master's thesis on obituaries. And so you always wonder, am I going to get an obituary when I die? Will I get that? The line from Independence Day is, because there are now alien ships hovering all over the major cities, the answer of whether we are alone in a universe has been answered. So what I do know from all of that is I probably will get an obituary when I die. But you know what? For a while there, I tried to fight what that clause would be. So there's your name, and then there's a clause, and then died Tuesday. She was, let's say, 140. And I was trying to, can I do something spectacular so that the clause isn't going to be about all that stuff? And the answer is no. I'm not trying to do anything different. I'm not going to win the Nobel Peace Prize in the next 10 years. So that's been the interesting thing about it, that it's even still kind of mentioned, and I'm becoming more comfortable with that thanks to free therapy provided by the University of Texas at Austin. I want to give them a shout out. But does that kind of help answer? It is weird. I would love to look at all the pieces that have been written about this and do a content analysis, but maybe not. I am instead going to be studying, I think, Carolyn Hack's and other advice columns, because I think that's more interesting.
Thank you for telling your story to Kate about the A&M. And I wondered if you could tell us what made you decide, just kind of building on the last question, What made you decide to go ahead and start talking?
I don't know if I can go there, but I will say this. I did not realize how awful academia had been to so many people. And maybe I've since heard from people who've had things a whole lot worse than me. So I will say maybe I was a bit naive, but I can't get into specifics. I didn't know academia was so bad. Oh, sorry.
As somebody who studies obituaries, do you have any thoughts on this proliferation of AI obituaries that are and really insulting to the families of the people who have passed away?
And are these being done by the funeral homes, or just people? Okay, so an interesting thing to me about AI is that if you can create a closed loop, and I may be one of the few journalists who believes this, but most stories, the news part is at the beginning and then the rest is just background, right, for a lot of things. If you could create a closed loop of a certain reporter's stories, and then after there's the news, you had something generate the rest of it. I could see that happening, but the problem now, as we all know, is that AI takes from everything and it gets us back to information. My students, I'm teaching, okay, it's a political season, so what am I teaching? Food journalism and sports media practicum, right? Who's the smart person, right? But the students had to name the champion, the girls champion at the US Open. Because Google thinks girls can stand in for women, if you Google that, a lot of times it gave you Arina Sabalenka, who was the women's champion. So the students who just picked up that first part, this was on a test quiz, luckily, they could have gotten that wrong. So, of course, I don't think right now AI can write those type of obituaries, but my main concern is that why aren't journalists at the front of things being created? Like, how can we control whatever that next thing is? How can we get out in front of it? Why aren't we in the room when this stuff is being developed? So they're awful now. They would be slightly better. But of course, I love a human-written obituary, though many of them can be terrible too. I mean, that's kind of one of the dirty little secrets of journalism, right? Some stuff is really good and some stuff really isn't. But at least we know who created it. I hope that helped answer that. Any more?
What are your thoughts about the diminishing of journalism programs in high schools these days? And then how is that affecting folks wanting to be journalists or study journalism in college? In other words, starting with high school, do we have a problem?
We are so lucky in the state that there are so many young people that Texas universities are flourishing, right? I think some of you might have seen that A&M now is going to have to finally limit its enrollment because they don't have space for the many people there. It is a problem that some people weren't able to study journalism in high school, but we have a lot of students who are like that, who come here, and I believe that if your high school didn't have fancy equipment or didn't have a newspaper or did its own games, you can still come here, and in 4 years, and actually in a year, we're gonna get you caught up with everybody. So do you have the enthusiasm? And as I said, a lot of our students come in not having any of that, especially from rural communities or underrepresented groups. So it is a problem. It absolutely is a problem. And if they did have programs, I think many school systems would try to control them so greatly that what they're producing might not be considered journalism, but we are lucky in that there are enough journalism programs and students here that they are thriving. But that's a good question. Congratulations.
You mentioned during your speech there are citizens out there that are doing the groundwork that could potentially help news organizations as far as explaining and transparency. And so I'm wondering, as a newsroom, how do you open yourself up to become that collaborative environment?
That is such a great question. One thing is like, can you give citizens 10 things they need to know to cover a meeting? Right? So the lead is not, a meeting was held, and what is the most important thing, blah, blah, blah. And then can you even list them the questions that you want them to answer, they answer it, and then you post it, right? Now, you wouldn't want to do that all the time, and maybe if you just don't have enough people to cover every single meeting. Like, there's a library commission here. And the Library Commission here in Austin built this beautiful library with a restaurant bar that's now closed, but also designed it in a way that the homeless would feel less welcomed. I don't know how much of that was covered. Maybe it was and I just missed it. But wouldn't it be great if you could get people who were interested in libraries and let them say if they have like a particular dog in that race. But what if you could read what they know about the Library Commission meetings? And just things like that, like things that they notice. And this isn't man on the street. Man on the street, A, it tended to be men, and B, that was very much cherry-picked, right? But this is like, how can citizens actually help you cover things that are going on? Or, hey, what is, the school lunch menu was supposed to be this, was it really that? I'm sure there are things that your newsrooms are doing right now in which you're trying to gather, information from the people. I mean, we do it every year with, give us your bluebonnet photos, right? And when it snows, give us your snow photos. Well, maybe we do more of that. And it doesn't all have to be heavy hitting. Give us your first day of school photos. But just the idea that your community feels a part of whatever you're doing. One of the things I've always admired about smaller publications or community papers is that if you're from Houston or Dallas or San Antonio, you may never appear in those major publications. But I can tell you, I bet if I were from Yvonne's paper or Fort Bend, I would have been in there when I was born, if I got on the Little League team, all kinds of stuff. So, that's one of the great things about community journalism, is that it is for the public and of the public. So am I done?